Welcome back. We are now talking about prosumers, or consumers that produce their own energy, and how they can contribute to energy systems. We know that they can make a huge contribution, but the transition from consumer to prosumer is still on its way. A study by CE Delft found that in their maximum self-sufficiency scenario, that by 2050, most countries can cover over 50% of electricity demand for households with prosumer technology. It's great in theory, but how do we get there in practice and what's holding us back? Well, that's what we're going to talk about for the next hour. And with me in the studio to talk about that, I have Kristijan Jarc, who had joined Salzburg AG as CIO and CDO in 2018, shifting his focus more on CDO tasks since spring last year. Before heading to Salzburg AG, Kristijan was with KUKA for about 15 years, where he held a wide variety of positions, such as Director of Business Process Center and Vice President of Digital Improvement. Having a strong background in agile management, strategy, agile methods, product development, digital marketing, e-commerce, innovation, and more. Thank you so much for joining us here in the studio, Kristijan.
Hi, Greta. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Great to have you here. Joining him, we also have Natasha Morgan, who has worked in business development at an IT market research provider, Gartner, head of business growth at a tech climate platform, and then found her niche in commercial management at Moisa, the UK's leading smart battery company, which was acquired by Lunar Energy in June last year. As senior commercial manager, Natasha works on partnerships to help achieve Lunar's mission of transitioning homes to 100% clean energy. Welcome to the panel, Natasha.
Thanks, Greta. Great to be here.
And we also have Friedrich Rojahn, who's founder and managing director at Solandeo. Before he gained experience in the energy sector at E.ON UK and made his first ideas come to life after co-founding several companies like Faces of Design, Discovergy, and SuperSwitcher. The Berlin-based tech company Solandeo is a metering point operator founded in 2013. Their digital metering systems map highly complex metering processes efficiently and scalably. Solandeo has a German-wide network of installation partners, which enables fast and flexible installation planning for meters, control systems, or battery storage systems. Friedrich, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hello there. It's a pleasure to be here.
And finally, we have Jannik Schall, who is co-founder and CPO at 1,5 Grad. Before founding 1,5, he worked at Sonnen for almost 6 years. And before that, held positions at Tesla, Avantgarde, worked as a freelance journalist, and founded his first company back in 2010. 1,5 Grad was founded last year in Hamburg by entrepreneurs and industry experts. The company's aim is to enable people in Germany and Europe to live a CO2-free life. This is implemented by providing technology for a decentralized clean energy supply, mobility and heat, as well as intelligent energy management. Jannik, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Good. All right. So let's dive straight into the questions. Jannik, how can we overcome supply chain shortages and skills shortages to ensure that those who want to become prosumers can?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question, and certainly one of the things that kept everyone in this industry busy this year. I think when it comes to supply chain, the answer is to take control of it, right? So we're very dependent from a few selected countries and a few selected suppliers when it comes to the supply chain, and I believe companies like ours, and as a matter of fact, anybody in this industry who tries to sell hardware needs to engage and take control of their supply chain. And that means that you need to buy raw materials and source really, the nitty-gritty little parts from wherever the suppliers might be. Then, that's what you need to do. And the other thing is, I believe, the deglobalizing some of the supply chains. So we had a wonderful solar industry, manufacturing industry in Germany about 10 years ago, and pretty much none of these companies are left. So I believe we made terrible mistakes here. We let other countries, especially China, take control of an entire market. So yeah, I see some kind of movement and some small changes happening also on the regulatory side to encourage companies to start manufacturing in Europe again. But we still got a long way to go. So to answer the question, I think we need to take control of the supply chains, and we need to bring manufacturing back to Europe. And then the second part of your question, if I remember that correctly, was about skilled labor shortages, so to speak. And when it comes to getting all of this stuff, so solar, heat pumps, energy storage, EV charging infrastructure, when you're talking about getting this into the market at scale, of course, each and every one of those systems needs to get basically through the same bottleneck, and that is installation. You need a person that goes on site and just gets the physical act of installation done. So we at 1,5 have been quite successful at attracting talent and recruiting people also from other industries. I believe our industry is, at the end of the day, it's one of the most exciting things you can do right now, right? So we need to get people excited, not just on the installation level, on the blue collar level, but we also need the smartest, the brightest of our best universities in this industry. So I think not a lot needs to be done, but I guess the good news is if you try hard, it works. So we launched a lot of training programs and started educating installers in particular, so people that go on the roof or electricians. I think, what we need to do is scale those types of programs.
Thank you, Jannik. A very multifaceted answer there, with some, very interesting points. Natasha, transparency is often considered a first crucial step in allowing users to understand and optimize their energy usage. How can we ensure that we have more transparency when it comes to energy management?
It's a good and it's a tricky question. So thinking really here about my answer, we have to really remain focused on the average end consumer customer. And there's a pretty horrible statistic that I think it's from the UK that average energy consumers spend about 7 to 9 minutes a year understanding their energy bills, which is scary, right? And whilst we as insiders sort of get what needs to happen, this is a pretty exclusive club. I'm probably sat here today talking to very much an echo chamber, right? But end customers fundamentally don't understand the basics of the energy market, price volatility, fundamentals around like physical limitations of the grid, carbon intensity, and they probably don't even really understand what the energy load is really made up of and how they can really change that from a cost and carbon perspective. And I think that a lot of that lack of understanding is really because there is a lack of transparency in the system. So, I know I'm speaking with a number of sort of German companies today. There is no exposure to price volatility for end customers. And that's a massive problem because then customers aren't going to think about when they use their power. Why would they? There's no value associated with that. They only think about perhaps how much do I use over a certain time period. And that means that they aren't thinking about optimization. And although us insiders know that, as part of the energy transition, it's going to be more important like when we use our power rather than how much, end customer and retail offerings currently are just fundamentally not aligned with giving that sort of level of transparency. And so it might seem obvious to us, but we need energy retail offerings to really help customers understand what what it means to be able to optimize our energy use. And in order to do that, we need time of use tariffs, which are obviously dependent on smart meter rollouts, and we need smart distributed energy resources. And I say smart because if we have 6 or 7 minutes a year focused on our energy bills, it's not realistic to expect end customers to be providing that optimization and running around switching things on and off as per when they get a text message. So I think that's, those are the key things, but also that those propositions might be rejected if customers can't see the benefit. So I think education as well as like the right customer offerings and the right technology is what we really need to create the sort of, the right propositions that are going to enable customers to really understand and engage in the way that we need them to.
Would you agree with those points, particularly from an Austrian perspective, Kristijan?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, this kind of transparency, I think that is really the big part of everything. Yeah, and to understand, and we see it currently in Austria. We see all this PV things going on. People are buying PV, almost everybody. So the market is really empty. Yeah, so you have to wait one year or longer to get a PV panels, or PV system on your roof. Yeah, so it really is now some kind of bad situation because people are willing to change it, to do something, but we don't have, on one hand, the transparency for how to save energy. On the other hand, that was the first question where we did get the materials to do it. Yeah, so that's a hard thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, smart meters, important thing. Friedrich, can you tell us how digital solutions can help us overcome some maybe outdated regulatory processes, such as pre-qualification for direct marketing, and of course, Germany's infamous, very basically non-existent smart meter rollout?
Yeah, the smart meter rollout is a touchy subject in Germany because, we've been waiting for that to kick off for about 14 years. So there's definitely things we can do on that front. In fact, I think smart meters are a nice way of how we can use digital technology to find good workaround around some of the problems that we face. And now, to be a little bit more precise, I think we can't overcome outdated regulation because at the end of the day, certainly when it comes to smart metering, you have to be regulatory compliant, right? You have to meet the standards that the regulator sets. Otherwise, people lose their right to play, their license to operate. So the question is, how can I use digitalization to make those requirements more manageable? And if we look at how that plays out in the smart metering space in our experience, a couple of examples here. So for instance, if you invest in a PV plant in Germany, similar situation to Austria, then it may take you a while to get that on your roof, but then you still need the local grid operator to exchange the meter to a two-way metering system. And across many DSO, across many distribution grids, customers then end up waiting 6 to 8 months for that meter, which clearly causes unnecessary delays. And that's typically, for instance, where an independent meter operator like Salzburg can come in and say, listen, to a partner, I don't know, like Firms, we can say, well, listen, for your customers, we can offer you a seamless process of getting the right meter in place as part of your total delivery chain in any grid in Germany within a matter of weeks, ideally at the same time as the plant is being installed. And so it's really about the ability to manage that integrated process efficiently and through digital workflows that is then key to deploying the technology that the regulator requires. And that's really about digital process competence as well as about the ability to interface seamlessly with third-party process platforms. And I think that's a key thing for many business models in this space, right? A lot of the hardware is actually commoditized already. So the challenge isn't in the hardware itself, it's actually in scaling the deployment of the technology. And that is very much about digital processes, about interfaces, about building ecosystems efficiently. That's something that traditional utilities often struggle with, and this is where independent players and innovators can come in, and where smart meter operators like Salzburg can provide play a useful role.
And how important are those digital ecosystems partnerships to trickle down and then eventually benefit prosumers?
Well, I think it's really, they tend to make the system work. What we find in our experience is that you're getting more and more integrated offers in the prosumer space, right? So initially, you can, as we know, a few years back, you would have one party selling a ground fault heat pump, the other one selling a battery storage system, and a third party selling the PV plant. And we're already moving to the space where customers can source the entire bundle from a single party. As a next step, they're sourcing the local intelligence to coordinate those components seamlessly from a provider such as gridX, right? To ensure that the components are used in the optimal fashion. And then behind that, we have, complex tariff bundles, flexible tariffs, as we just mentioned, green energy trading, and so on, which then require typically smart metering in order to bill and balance those various regulated products. So there is, I think, a fundamental need for people to play systems integrator, the way that people in this call already are doing it. And there is a need for different solutions to come together. And you need the process competence then by all parties to make that feel seamless to the end customer, right? Because behind a complex prosumer offer, there's typically a number of regulated or unregulated solutions with their own regulated or unregulated process chains. And, the customer doesn't want to have 5 installation dates. They don't want to wait for 3 different parties. They just want, to put down their money and have an amazing experience and then become an active participant. And I think this is where the ecosystem and the ability for those players to integrate seamlessly is really critical.
Mm-hmm. And when we widen that ecosystem a little bit wider to talk about grid operators, Kristijan, are grid operators kind of blocking some of the transformations of energy systems? And if so, how can they be incentivized to take a more active role?
I think that's a good question. Also, maybe a little bit hard because I see it now for years because we are dealing now with a smart meter rollout currently. And if you have to adapt and integrate millions of households to bring in the smart meter, and these guys are delivered for years and ages, only one direction to energy. So there was the electricity plant, and then to bring the energy to the consumers, yeah. And now there's a completely new way of dynamic, this kind of prosumers. So now you have to think completely new. And sometimes if you see for some grids, you have to wait years to get it released, to get by the politicals, by all of these landlords to get a grid built there, yeah. So really that takes years, ages, yeah. And now they have to shift and have to now to work faster, to think in new digital ways. So I think that's really hard for them. On the one hand, it's this regulation, you have the politicals, all this thing, yeah. The second, it's a new technology. Yeah, so we're talking now about cloud. We're talking about to be faster, to develop really quick. And these guys are trained for years to be really stable, to be secure, to be resilient. That's and you have to talk with them. You have this kind of different culture, and you have to explain them why it's now different. And that's a really hard thing. And I'm coming from a meeting this morning where we really talked about that. Yeah, because we installed now around about 500,000 meters, and yeah, that's also to be really stable in the process, yeah. But it's a thing by regulation and politics, yeah, to make it happen, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jannik, most people want to save money and become self-sufficient. How can we create? I mean, we've already talked about this, obviously, making partnerships and kind of simplifying it for the user. But from your perspective, how can we kind of simplify this switch and empower end users?
I think a couple of very important things were just mentioned. So first of all, I'm not super familiar with the situation in Austria, but I would say, generally speaking, especially if we look at the German market, I think it is ridiculous that we're still having the conversation about smart meters. And we are very active in Scandinavia. We will install something like 2,500 PV systems in Sweden this year. Each and every customer has a smart meter, and pretty much all of them are on a dynamic tariff, right? So this is we're sometimes having this conversation, and it sounds like we're trying to invent something completely new. It's not new. It has been done before. And, now is the time to get our act together. And maybe to go back to what Friedrich said, we need integrated solutions. Now I'm trying to answer your question, Greta. The customer doesn't want to wait for 5 different parties, is what you said. And I think that is very true, right? The answer to making the prosumer proposition interesting for customers is making it simple. I think this is quite obvious, right? So we need a seamless integrated solution, and especially if you talk about the combination of solar and heat, you don't want to deal with different companies, right? You want everything from one hand, and this is exactly what we are creating, this one-stop shop where we provide everything from solar, batteries, EV charging infrastructure, and heat pumps. And on top of that, add a second layer with energy management and also, let's say, energy services or just, an energy retail offering. And I think this is kind of the direction where we need to be moving in, simply because the customer wants this holistic, simple approach, and they don't want to have to deal with all these different parties, and they also don't want to deal with the complexity of that market. The customer doesn't care that there's 900 different DSOs in Germany and thousands of them across Europe, right? That it's our job as companies in this industry to break it down and make it simple. That's the first point. I think the second point is about total cost of ownership. So the prosumer proposition works if we can make it financially viable for the consumer and offer a cheaper total cost of ownership compared to just buying random components and having them, whatever it is they do. So take a heat pump, for an instance. The heat pump is controlled by a thermostat. That's it. It doesn't care about the energy wholesale market, the spot market, right? It doesn't check the charge at EPEX spot or the weather forecast or the solar system. The EV charger just charges whenever the car is being plugged in, right? That's it. That's the only control there is usually. So if we can bring all of these moving parts together and generate an additional value for the customer and make that value accessible in a way that the consumer understands, okay, this is going to reduce the total cost of ownership for my system, then I think we are going to get into a position to be able to scale these types of prosumer propositions and business models.
Thanks, Jannik. And yeah, go for it, Natasha.
Because I think it's a really, really important point, and what Jannik said is absolutely right. But I think the point I wanted to add is that we need to embrace business models that we've seen in other industries that make it accessible in the first instance, because for the vast majority of people, spending potentially like tens of thousands of euros or pounds is just not viable, and we need to make this a just transition. So we need to adopt the energy as a service model. As we're all carrying around like £1,000 phones in our pockets, we don't buy them up front. It needs to be the exact same, and I think we can't lose sight of that. And there are business models, lots in the US, where we're seeing that happening today. So I think we need to sort of take some of those lessons and really start running with those propositions.
Yeah, absolutely. And another important thing once consumers become prosumers is managing supply and demand. Natasha, how can we compensate prosumers fairly for using their devices at the right time?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I think it's something that actually most people are grappling with a little bit, because we've talked about simplicity a lot. We've talked about customer education, and I think we're all on a journey in figuring out what's the balance of like being able to provide a simple offer that people understand, but also fairly compensating them for how they have provided flexibility to the grid. And at Lunar, how we think about this is there are a couple of key principles that you must be designing your customer offerings around. And so the first one is that flex costs and customers, whether that is in battery degradation or that is in some sort of inconvenience, or in fact higher energy bills. That's why you can't do flexibility for free. It costs people. So number one principle. Number two is that customers should be better off for participating in flexibility. It should be a no-brainer. which sort of leads to point number 3, which is reward needs to be proportional to the flexibility that is provided. Otherwise, you have people winning and losing in the system, which is not right. Those points probably sound really simple and obvious, but it's not really very commonly deployed. We see most flexibility offerings globally really falling into the sort of framework of providing some sort of upfront discount to a hardware cost. And whilst that's a really simple model, it's not fair or proportional to the flexibility being provided. I think that these offerings are being made from a simplicity perspective, but also the people making those flexibility sort of propositions do not have sight of the cost, the ultimate cost to the end consumer, because they don't know their energy tariff, or they don't know what their behind the meter optimal sort of behavior of these assets is. And so this sort of separation that we see of flexibility and like behind the meter behavior, I think is one that is going to cause problems. Perhaps we can get away with it a little bit now, but I think as we step into this really smart grid future, we need to ensure that flexibility behind the meter optimization are combined and they are considered hand in hand, and building our customer propositions off the back of that, which, you know, is sort of exactly what we're trying to do with our software. So I hope that gets to the point. I know it's a little bit of a tricky one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jannik, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if we combine, because before we talked about transparency, right? If we combine simplicity and transparency, I think you have to come to the conclusion that the answer is to build an amazing app, a customer front end and interface that visualizes the advantages also on a dollarized level to the customer, right? They need to understand in a very simple fashion the contribution they're making and how they're benefiting from, you know, what they're actually providing to the grid, for example.
Add something to that, yeah. Because that was a good point. I'm not sure it's so easy only to say, let's build an app. Yeah, because what we see, where's the target group? Yeah, and we do all this customer panels and events, and we're discussing about energy communities and PV. And if you look in there, there are people 50 plus. They are mainly men people. Yeah, you see that said under 5% of women, and they are far away from app users. Yeah, they only want that it's working. Yeah, so only to build an app, it's not enough. You have to train them, explain it, and you have to show them how to get into this world. Yeah, that's what we see. Yeah, because our first idea was also let's build an app. Yeah, really easy. Take an UI UX designer, make it nice, make it convenient. Yeah, but at the end, if you then talk to the people, you see the target group is completely different. Yeah. So that's why we are also then think about to change our strategy to say, okay, let's maybe build dashboard for the mayors or something, because we have this kind of communities. Yeah, you have to really look exactly into the target group. Yeah, you have to understand what are the problems, and then build not only think that you can solve it only by technology. Yeah.
I think that ties into what Natasha said before about people only spend 7 minutes or something on their energy bills per year. Do you think with an app they would spend more time looking at their energy usage and things like that, or if it's designed?
No, that's the perfect question, because so what we figured out, we said, okay, because we did some interviews and we found out we did interview with 5,000 people, and all the guys or people who are started with PV. 75% of these people are getting deeper and want really dealing with that and want to get more insights. Yeah. So if you are a prosumer, you change your behavior. And let's say 70% of these people are really now say, I want to understand the bill better. I want to understand how the system is working. How can I improve it? Yeah. But I think you have to be a prosumer. You have to get into that, and maybe you have to be a little bit technical guy. And then that brings you then to the next level. Yeah. But I think that's the way how I think the story goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone want to jump in there?
Well, maybe if I can add to that, because I think this is just building on what the other guys have said. I think there's a number of key themes which are emerging from this discussion, right? One is transparency, one is simplicity, the third one is creating value for the end customer, and it's integrated solutions that bring all of those 3 key points together, right? And then, you know, as we've just heard, there's the important element of customer centricity, because customers aren't all the same. right? So you've got to give different types of customer the ability to interact with the system in different ways, because so there are no doubt, undoubtedly, also in our experience, those customers who have time and a technical background and take pride in the technical capabilities, and they want to engage really deeply with the solution. But I think the vast majority of customers, I think this has been proven by extensive research again and again, the vast majority of customers want to feel like they're stakeholders in the system and they're participants, but they don't want to have to make a lot of tricky choices. So they're looking for solutions that essentially optimize for them within the parameters that just within parameters set by the customer's needs, right? So you have a system that automatically optimizes auto consumption of the PV or the electricity generated by the PV unit, and then maybe uses the flexibility from the residual flexibility from the battery storage system to trade that on the intraday exchange. And do you want the customer sitting there pressing buttons to participate in the intraday market? No, you don't, and the customer doesn't either. So this is very much about, I think, packaging, making it simple for the customer to be a passive participant, really, but feeling engaged. And that's kind of the art of it, right? And a lot of that is about giving them tangible value, giving them a sense of pride, giving them information about what the good stuff is that is happening because they chose to invest or to make their basement or their roof available. And I think if you do that, then you can have the best of both worlds, really.
Yeah, automation has definitely been a topic that's come up a lot in the last few days. So I think very important to have those automated processes for prosumers. Kristijan, you just mentioned energy communities before. What do you see is the role of peer-to-peer trading in the future of energy systems?
I see, especially now with a new dynamic market situation with the pricing, I think that really will raise, and we have a lot of requests for that. On the other hand, it's currently by the regulation too complex. Yeah, so it's people need to do a lot of paperwork to get it done. You bring people, there are a lot of people really interested in, and I think that's the future. Also because then you can combine it later on with the battery. You can share the invest you have in this kind of communities. Yeah, you have this kind of, you produce some kind of freedom because you can decide, okay, what's the price? Yeah, in let's say in an energy community, I can define it, so I can be part of the whole thing or the whole story of the system. Yeah. But there's, I think, a long way because we have to really lower the regulations. Yeah, we have to be more open-minded for that, and then we have to explain the people really good, especially to politics and who build these guys who are building the regulations, that we need here more flexibility. Yeah, but for sure, I think that's the future. Yeah, because at the end, I believe almost that it's really a bit depending about the customer. If you have your own house, or if you're living in a city, but these people who have really a house, I think they will all be prosumers in the future. Yeah, and they were looking up, okay, how can I charge my car? How can I use the PV? And how can I maybe trade with my neighbor the energy? Because that's what we currently we have currently 2 projects running here, and we really sometimes struggling with regulations, with different opinions and how we are reading the laws, but that, I think, it's the future for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone want to add anything to that?
Maybe one point to that.
Yeah.
Because then that is our come only with a smart meter. So we need a rollout, and we are, let's say, kind of first mover on that, because we are currently rolling out in Austria the smart meters. We have here some obstacles, some things we are struggling with, and then we come directly after that with the energy communities, and to bring this kind of trading between in the neighborhood, and that's a lot of learnings coming there out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then kind of moving beyond that a little bit, tokenization and gamification are terms that are being thrown around a bit in the industry. Do you think they have potential in the future?
I think if you look in a brighter scope, that you say you make tokenization can help us to have a kind of plan B regarding the regulations, because you find different ways to deal and to trade. That's maybe is a kind of opportunity, especially if you go over the borders, because if you stay in every country, it's really hard. Yeah, that's something what will help us. And gamification, I'm not sure. We are still discussing that forwards and backwards, and to see if this really somebody will jump on that. Yeah, We see it on the business side, because people want to compare, let's say, different plans. Or if you're in retail, they say, okay, I have this location A, B, and how are the comparison on that? Maybe there you can build in gamification. Yeah, I'm really not sure if that really works with a kind of prosumers. But that's the same thing. I think you have to try it out to see and learn, going on a learning journey and see, do you find some kind of really concept or system which really works? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Natasha, what about in the UK market? Do you see any value there in the future?
I think my comments are probably perhaps from a global perspective, which is there's no doubt some value in perhaps education and, getting people more engaged and interested, but perhaps a bridge technology, because as we've talked about, automation and actually basically taking the minute by minute or hour by hour decisions away from the customers is also really ultimately where we need to get to. And perhaps having my robot against your robot's not that interesting. Of like, how much money can I save? Well, it's the software making those decisions. But that's not to say there's not some value in it. I just don't think it's the key tools to unlocking the smart grid prosumer model.
Mm-hmm. Interesting what you just said there about the software making the decisions, because where's the line between automation and kind of the software taking away decisions from you? Because we want the ease, but then people also want to have some autonomy over their own decisions and energy as well.
Good question. So maybe this is perhaps controversial, maybe not. Certainly at Lunar, we want people to set it and forget it. Like, you put your inputs, so like what you want, what we're optimizing for, and then you don't have to worry about it, because people are busy and energy is not something that is sort of top of my to-do list, although I'm probably slightly an unusual person, as I do tend to try and do my own sort of demand reduction during peak times, but I'm not the average consumer, right? And for us, it's about set it and forget it. It's let the technology get on it, let technology make those decisions. But you need trust to do that. So that's a big piece of the puzzle that perhaps is missing.
We've got a question from the audience directed to Jannik. How do you feel about monetizing customer flexibility and production through direct marketing or direct Vermarktung?
Obviously, thank you for that question. Obviously, we feel very positive about that, right? At the end of the day, we believe, as I said before, we need to find ways to stack different value streams on top of each other to reduce the total cost of ownership for the consumer. And of course, direct marketing is one of the probably at the moment most lucrative ways to generate additional income for German customers at least. Let's see what happens on the regulatory side in January. But and the second point, flexibility. Yeah, I mean, this is, if we can control the larger loads. I'm not talking about the Philips Hue smart home kind of loads. I'm talking about the heat pump and the EV and the battery. Those are the most interesting assets you can play with. And in order to have really have fun with these assets, you need three things. And the first one is you need a direct relationship with the customer, right? So if you're just a manufacturer who sells through multiple channels, that's kind of difficult. And this is what a lot of companies had tried in the past, Tesla being one of them, building virtual power plants with only one asset they control, the battery. All right. So what we need is access to the customer plus the ability to select the devices we position and we install. And this is something that at least gets me very excited, that we as 1,5, we select the suppliers we work with. So I don't have to make sure that I can manage 50 different heat pumps, right? It just has to work with the one I sell. And if I bring that together, so I have the direct relationship with the customer, I have the devices I can control from a technical perspective. And then in some markets, I need a third pillar, so to speak, and that's the energy retail contract, right? So in order to market flexibility, in most markets or in many markets, it makes sense to actually be the utility. In other markets, like for example in Australia, there's no necessity for that. But that's what we're trying to do at 1,5, to bring together these 3 building blocks, monetize the flexibility, and utilize the proceeds to reduce the total cost of ownership.
Friedrich, you were smiling at some of those points there. Did you want to add anything?
Well, I think I fully agree with everything that Jannik has just said. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, and this, of course, we end up then with smart metering for the billing and the balancing, if nothing else. I was thinking back to the point we had just earlier on about gamification. I think it's worth just looking at this in a slightly more discrete way, where you're saying, well, do I want gamification for managing flexibility? No, because that's what you've got to automate, because then you've got to take into account trade-offs between the different types of assets. This is the market, the local grid, and so on. And that's not a decision that is easily informed, is not easily made even by a very informed prosumer. Where I think gamification does have a role to play is when you have on the energy efficiency side of things, right? This is where social benchmarking can play a really valuable role. And that way, that allows you to optimize demand against the local flexibility and the local generation you have. And again, basically driven by the same data, because you're saying, well, listen, here's how you compare to no social benchmarking. This is how you compare to other customers. Here's some easy ways for you to optimize your behavior, fully acknowledging that you live a busy life. So I think it's really about combining the best of both worlds, if you will, and so fit for purpose. And I think that goes very well with what Jannik just said, and what Natasha said, indeed.
Yeah, thanks for that, Friedrich. And yeah, Jannik, go for it.
Can I just quickly add something about gamification? Because Kristijan, I'm sorry, I have to disagree about your statement about the target audience not being really, willing to use apps and digital interfaces. I mean, the only person I know that's not on WhatsApp is my 101-year-old grandma. I think everyone up to, I would say, their mid-80s use these types of apps. And if they're not using them, and we've spent a lot of time in the past couple of years, also in my previous roles at Sonnen, for example, we spent a lot of time thinking about how can we make the customer interact with us, and especially, of course, our target audience, the prosumer, the homeowner, that is typically a little bit older. And I think you can make it work, right? And you mentioned yourself that when that for the prosumer, looking at the data of their system, that is something really exciting, right? So check the app and see like, oh, I've produced 40 kilowatt hours today. That's amazing, right? And if we take gamification not as a little gimmick, as a little extra to play around a little bit and do fancy UX designs, but as something to encourage the customer to interact even more with the app and apps and platforms we provide, I think this can be quite successful. And I mean, in other markets, it has already been proven, right? I'm sure there's not a single Tesla customer in the world that doesn't use the app also to look at their car or their solar system if they have a Tesla system. So I think it works. And yes, Europe and especially Germany and Austria and Switzerland, people are a little bit more reluctant with these new types of technologies, but I think it just means that we didn't develop the right solution yet, right?
Yeah, you're right. Maybe I have to be more precise about that. I think what we really figured out, it's if you have only, let's say, a chart in your app and you see your charts every day, you watch that, you look at these charts maybe 1 time, 3 times, after 1 week, it's getting boring. Yeah. The question is, how can we get into interactions? Yeah, can we, let's say, okay, let's combine it with I can charge my car and I can see my PV together. Yeah, so we are always have this kind of vision. Let's build the, you know, it from the banking, where you have in Austria we have this Charge app, which is a kind of full service app for all your banking stuff. In Germany, we have the Sparkassen app and so on. I think we have to think in that kind of way, because only if you generate as a customer is using the app day by day on daily basis, then you really have this kind of dialogue with the customer. Yeah, but only to show the kind of charts where you see, okay, is my consumption, or what is my PV? How much do I get into the grid, or how much can I use? I think that's not enough. So we have to really have a really deep look into the customer journey and understand how we can generate value. Yeah, but I agree. But they are not the people who are like maybe you and me. We are every day, every minute, or on the mobile phone. Yeah, I think it's a different target group. Yeah, but I agree. We have to really find the sweet spot. The people are using these apps, yeah, not only to show diagrams. And the most what I see currently in the market, which coming from, let's say, all the PV manufacturers, is the main business model is hardware, and so a little bit software. So it's always a focus on hardware, not on the software side. Yeah, software also. If you look today on a EV charger, and you get all these apps, and I checked hundreds of apps. Yeah, and I'm always. It makes me so crazy because the app is not working well. Yeah, if I go to charge my car, I have trouble. This doesn't work. Or there's really not a good software. Yeah, and I think we have to work on that. Yeah, yeah. So it's something between. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've talked a lot about kind of incentivizing prosumers to make sustainable decisions. Obviously, that's the main topic. Friedrich, we've talked about energy communities as well. Is it important to instill a sense of community in prosumers so that they're more likely to use energy at the right time and to have grid-friendly behavior? And if so, how can we do that?
I think that's a really important question. I think my starting hypothesis here would be that, in fact, somebody who takes the decision to become a prosumer already implicitly sees themselves as an active participant in the system, right? So they're open to be a member of a community, however that is defined. And of course, it benefits the brand of the company, of whoever provides the solution to the customer, if they can make that customer feel like part of a community, right? I think Sonnen, for instance, did that extremely well in the past with the Sonnen Club, saying that, you know, you can be part of this group of people that are together, you know, this network community are advancing the energy transition, just to give one example. And they did a really good job at making that an emotional message, not a technical message, really. Now, I think the key thing then is that you have to underpin that with actual product. You've got to show people that they are, as a member of a community, they are participating in the system. Even if it's the system, even if it's the technology doing it for them on their behalf, right? And that really, to my mind, means that in prosumer solutions, in Germany, it's becoming more and more common, as we've just heard, for the integrator to provide a number, in fact, of different, to bundle a number of different customer offers to stack value, as Jannik said, right? So people are saying, well, okay, my residual feed-in is being directly marketed and it's being traded. My residual energy consumption is being delivered to me with an energy retail or energy service package. I'm having additional services that I engage with, and those aren't just operating in the background. That's sort of the hygiene factor, but I can feel that I am a participant in something bigger by letting the system work, by letting it do its magic. So I think that's the solutions that we talked about, and building a sense of community, to me, naturally go hand in hand. What doesn't work is just selling hardware and then expecting people to feel like they're part of something. You know, that's exactly to Kristijan's point, where I think this is why in this industry, like as in any other, we're moving from hardware to services to digital value creation to energy products. And it's only when you bring those together that people actually feel that there's a sense in what they're doing which is ultimately what the sense of community is about, right?
Mm-hmm. And Natasha, we've talked a lot about different solutions, flexibility solutions. Do you think there's any other storage or residential flex solutions that we haven't really covered today?
Not really. Jannik covered it pretty well. There are three big meaningful loads within the home. You've got your heat, your EV, and your battery. And, anything outside of that is pretty marginal. And generally, if you've got a battery, that is a proxy for all of those little white goods within your home when you boil the kettle, etc., but without having an impact on your convenience. V2G is really exciting. I think it could be a really disruptive technology because of the combination of obviously the capabilities of the battery with the sort of the size of the EV battery. But again, as we've talked about over and over, having the right software to optimize not just one of these assets, but all of these assets together, and being able to respond appropriately to signals and external sort of parameters is key. But I think some of the points of being that passive, active participant are really bang on, and being able to enable that with the right solutions is just so key.
Mm-hmm. We've only got a few more minutes left, so I'd just like to kind of ask each of you if you had one main wish of simplifying the switch to prosumers or kind of making the process more seamless, what would it be? Jannik, starting with you.
That's a tough one. I guess it's and I know unfortunately it's a very unrealistic wish, but it's the regulatory jungle we need to get rid of. If we want to get scalable, standardized solutions to the customers, especially in the prosumer area, we can't be dealing with thousands of different stakeholders. That's pretty much it. I know it's not going to happen, at least not anytime soon. But I think in the meantime, we have to be courageous. We have to do what we can with what we got, right? It is our job as, this industry, if not us, who's, to solve those issues and provide those solutions. So I guess if we can't wait for politics to solve it for us, we need to provide compelling solutions to the people out there.
Mm-hmm. Kristijan, what about you?
Yeah, that's a really, really, really tough question. And also, I said regulation was one topic was first in my mind, but on the other hand, what I see, and now I'm 5 years in the business of utilities, and I think what we really need is also maybe a different kind of mindset. Yeah, so we really have to, and now the business is coming from, okay, the customer is coming anyway. Yeah, and we have to really get into this kind of product mindset. Yeah, to understand, okay, how can I really build product, how I can develop product, and how can I bring it to the market? How can then I sell it? Yeah, we are now working for almost 1.5 years for e-commerce. Yeah, and you would say in other branches, it's standard, and we are here. Sometimes feels like we're doing it in a greenfield. Yeah, so I think we need more people. Like I think we are here in this meeting on this panel to really to think new and get into the innovation, also to convince the other people, hey, we have to get to the next level. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Friedrich, what about you?
Well, building on, I think, what the other guy said, I think we can't get away from the fact that this industry is super complex, right? And you have all these different technology vendors, you have all these different actors, whether that's grid operators, retailers, and so on. So to me, the key is to achieve two things. One is a higher level of interoperability through standardization of interfaces, right? Because that just takes a whole lot of complexity out of it and just provides a massive increase in the ability to customize solutions for specific problems, right? The sort of walled garden mentality is nice on a company by company level, but it doesn't really help the energy transition as a system. The second thing is making sure that we set the right incentives. And I think if I look at the current debate, for instance, we have a very live debate in Germany at the moment about how to implement the EU's ideas on protecting consumers on one hand from rising energy prices, on the other hand for financing that. And I think what's clear is that certainly smaller customers, prosumers, need to be exempt from any taxation on surplus profits, because I think the high level of wholesale prices and the volatility of wholesale prices is really what drives a lot of the prosumer use cases and what funds a lot of the innovation that we now see. So from the moment where I start capturing those rents and imposing a huge amount of administrative effort on those customers, I'm effectively killing the innovation that we need for the energy transition. And I think that's something that has to be managed very carefully.
Thanks, Friedrich. And finally, Natasha.
Friedrich stole my point actually, which was it was really about the interoperability. So for us as a solution provider, we're trying to integrate with third-party assets, and it can be really difficult. And we need to be able to create some sort of standardization from both communications protocol perspective, but also when we're looking at flexibility markets, you've got different markets with different requirements, registration requirements, and sort of wraps into Jannik's point as well of just you step into a different market and you have a wildly different sort of requirement, and it makes it very difficult to scale any of these business models, which makes it then more difficult to do anything, because from a prosumer and residential perspective, scale is key. But when we're sort of wrapped in knots from complexities with lack of standardization across everything that we do, it becomes incredibly difficult. So but I think there are some moves in the right direction, but it's if we could get there a bit quicker, that would be nice.
Absolutely. Thank you, Natasha, and thank you to all of you for the very insightful panel. And obviously interoperability is a very important aspect for us at gridX too. So thanks again for your contribution. Hope you have a great afternoon, and we'll be back in 1 minute with Mario Herger. He'll give you a keynote speech on autonomous and electric vehicles and their impact on the grids.